We're back for another album reaction and review. Thanks so much for hanging out. I hope you're having a great day. Today we're going to be listening to A Moon-Shaped Pool by Radiohead. If you've been part of the channel for the past couple months, you'll know that we've listened to a couple of albums from Radiohead, that being OK Computer, Kid A, and In Rainbows. And ever since I listened to those albums, I gotta say, Radiohead is now my third favorite band of all time behind the Red Hot Chili Peppers and the Strokes at number 1 and 2. I'm not kidding when I say I've listened to those albums pretty much every single day since we heard them. And I'm continuing to be impressed and hit with the same amount of emotion that I did when I first heard those songs. And as much as I wanted to dive into more of the band's discography, I decided to wait until today because we really spoiled ourselves with those 3 albums. And I felt, what better time than right now to jump into A Moon-Shaped Pool because of the theme of this month with love. What I learned about A Moon-Shaped Pool is that it discusses a lot of heartbreak, either directly or indirectly, when it comes to the singer Tom York's divorce from his partner of 25 years. And I can only imagine the amount of emotion that is going to be expressed within this album from Tom's point of view and his experiences in this relationship, because he's already such an emotional human being when it comes to music as it stands. This album also came out in 2016, which means this is the most recent album from the band since they disbanded and started their own side projects. So I gotta say, I am just as excited to get into this review as y'all are. So like I said, the album came out in 2016. It's made up of 11 songs and it is 52 minutes long. The first song is Burn the Witch. Let's go. Strings right off the bat. His voice is timeless. The echoing on that. Sounds like he's just shouting into a cave. I love how all the instrumentation is sitting in this. Love how these strings are swelling right now. Yeah, wow. That was epic. That was really intense. And I can feel a lot of emotion swelling within me from that. The orchestral arrangement in this song was the true standout, but Tom's voice has continued to be such an excellent constant across the band's changing styles over these albums. And I'm continued to be amazed by Tom's voice in the sense that it sounds the exact same as it did in OK Computer. When we got to the section where Tom sang Burn the Witch, with the echoing effect on his voice, it sounded like a cool breeze was coming across from the music. There was this feeling of winter in this, and felt like you were in the middle of a cave in a winter storm. That's the feeling that I was getting from this. The cymbal or that tambourine effect in the percussion also sounded like icicles. I don't know if that makes sense, but it felt like it was adding to that feeling of winter within this mix. The song felt very calming throughout this, and then when we got to the final section where the music was swelling, it really did feel like a panic attack. I may need to brush up on my history, but this song sounds like a witch hunt, almost like it's talking about the Salem witch trials. This was an epic intro to this album, but there was also some simplicity to the instrumentation as well that we really didn't get a lot of in Rainbows. So I'm curious to see how the album evolves moving forward. The next song is Daydreaming. I'm getting Kid A vibes right off the bat. Definitely dreamy. These keys are really good. That was already so emotional. God, those voices. The instrumental feels very hopeful. It feels like it's trying to make the best out of a bad situation. And those strings feel like a voice that's reaching out to you. That heaviness kind of feels like a monster. That was really unsettling at the end, but everything else was so emotional. I'm surprised that I was able to make it through fine. The music in this one, just like before, isn't that complex, but it feels like the band has really honed in on their sound and understanding what it is that really hits emotionally with their listeners. This song had some of the same emotions as I was feeling during How to Disappear Completely, and I don't think they're that far off from each other with how Tom is processing these emotions, because in How to Disappear Completely, he was trying to cope with the struggles that came with touring and how he can process and de-stress from that lifestyle. Whereas this one, while it can have the same implications, it really feels like he's trying to process the grief and loss of heartbreak. And throughout this song, I was getting a sense of mourning, a sense of sorrow, as if you are processing the grief of a loss. And at the very end, as the music was changing its feeling, you were getting this sense of looking forward to the future and trying to change your perspective into a glass half full mindset. There was some echoing in the vocals throughout some of these lines, and it was almost like small snippets of past memories coming back and rushing to you, maybe of past personas or personalities that were coming through and trying to reach back out to you to try and cling on to those memories. And you just had to rid yourself of all of that so you can hone in and be who you truly are for the future. All of these lines were really hitting home with me, but I think the one standout was, "This goes beyond me and you." I'm sure a lot of people can relate, and sometimes the universe just has something else in store for you, and it may not feel like it in the present, but it's always going to be for the better good of your growth. At the very end of this song, there was a dropout in the music, almost like a calming coming over you and a sense of relief. You could finally breathe again. But then there was that swelling with the deeper section of the strings, and it really sounded like a beast. It sounded like something that was starting to eat away at you, like a shadowy figure. So curious how that's going to maybe play into some of the future songs and see if we can get a sense of where that was actually coming from. The next song is Dex Dark. These keys off to the side, it's like sprinkling. Sometimes your biggest fear is something you have to tackle head on. I think that's what that's saying right there. I love how the keys are complementing this. The guitar and the bass are really good here. I like this. Man, that was really doing a lot for me. I think there was a lot of courage coming out of Tom within that song, in the sense that you can't always avoid or repress your feelings, your fears. There are some things that are unavoidable and you have to tackle head on, regardless of how scary or difficult that it is. As the song was developing, to me, when we got to this section, it's almost as if he is tackling it head on, but what he realizes is it was actually so much easier than he made it out to be. When he says a 10-ton head made of wet sand, it's as if he's showing this wall that he puts up for himself is just a front, because he's much more vulnerable when you really look through that. Anything that's made out of wet sand is not going to last. And I love that he used Wet Sand because that happens to be one of my favorite songs from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. So this song had a lot of optimism to it. And this final section was giving me the same transition as we had received in Paranoid Android, with both his delivery and the change in the music style. And I think this is probably my favorite song that we've heard so far. The next song is Desert Island Disc. Was feeling country or folk. First off, the music was so light and so different than anything we had received from Radiohead, at least from what I've listened to. The constant acoustic guitar throughout the entire song was a nice foundation for this story that Tom was trying to tell. Tom is showing that he is brokenhearted right now, and he's describing it as an open ravine, saying that it is the deepest cut that he's ever experienced. But as the song is going through, he's showing that he is having a new perspective on life and seeing either new or old versions of himself anywhere he goes. And it seems like Tom is realizing how this relationship maybe had been negatively affecting his life now that there is some space between him and his partner. He's standing on the edge of his partner's era in his life, and he's moving on to the next part. In the last section, different types of love are possible. He's not necessarily just talking about romantic love. He can also be talking about self-love in this, and he's starting to really discover himself again. This may be one of my favorite songs from Radiohead that I've heard, and it may be one of the most simple. And I think why the song is called Desert Island Disc goes back to the question that I'm sure everyone has been asked is, if you were stranded on a desert island, what would you bring with you? Maybe this is Tom's way of describing his most prized possession or necessity that he needs to survive if he was on a desert island. The next song is Ful Stop. I'm already taking a look at these words, and with the music, there's more of a darker, sinister feel to this. It's more attention-grabbing. It's almost urgent. This rhythm is so hypnotizing.
Take
Wow. Wow. Lots of emotion in those deliveries. Even the greats are relatable. I've been consistently getting this feeling of the same sounds that were coming out of Kid A and In Rainbows. This one felt like a mix of Idiotic and Weird Fishes. The rhythms, the pacing, the deliveries. I was getting really emotional because this section right here, throughout all of this and throughout this entire album so far, Tom is showing that he has been more or less the bigger person in these situations. He is really handling this very strongly with a lot of maturity. But this section right here, even through all of that, he wants that person more than anything. And it really shows that he is human just like all of us. I think through all of this, you can start feeling a little more of that anger and frustration that was eating away at Tom throughout this process. When he says strike up the tinderbox, I immediately thought of somebody ready to set something on fire. So they burnt their relationship to the ground. They burnt that bridge. It's over. He says a foul-tasting medicine, which gets you thinking about getting a taste of your own medicine. So if this is all coming from his perspective, well, then maybe he's not so blameless after all. This is a very repetitive song, but it doesn't do a disservice to the music or to my listening experience, because I think the message that Tom is trying to deliver to his listeners is that his way of processing this anger and frustration is a cyclical process, and he's repeating himself over and over again, which I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. It's part of that healing process, and everyone's is different, but this feels very relatable. And the song being repetitive really only serves to enhance the experience. Like I said, this song reminds me a lot of Idiotic and Weird Fishes, and that's always going to be a good thing. The next song is Glass Eyes. Very watery.
Hey, it's me. I just got off the train. A frightening place. The faces are concrete gray, and I'm wondering, so cold from the inside out. No great German message coming in on the oh so small, glassy-eyed light of day.
Holy shit.
Trails out and heads down the mountain through the dry brook. I don't know where it leads. I don't really care. I feel there's love to go. I feel there's
that was so heavy, and he framed that so perfectly. I just want to take a second to say thank you to all of you who recommend these albums to me. If it wasn't for any of y'all, I'd never get to experience any of these albums. How to Disappear Completely, Motion Picture Soundtrack, all of those songs, I was feeling those same emotions within this. But Tom's story, along with the music, was what was really hitting home with me here. You can tell that this is really where the emotions started to kick in for Tom regarding this breakup. Anybody he passes by in the world, he's not even recognizing them as other people. He's just seeing them as gray figures. And he's in that limbo state that I'm sure everyone is familiar with, where they don't know whether they should continue to move on or to try again and go back into that vicious cycle. Once we get to the second verse, that's where the emotion of the song really swells, and you can feel all of that weight that is hitting Tom. The swelling of those deep strings can give you a sense of how heavy all of this is to Tom, followed with those very bright strings that swelled and just kept building and building. It's almost reflecting the love that he feels towards his partner and how intense that love is, because brightness should be a symbol of love. And in his words, he's describing how difficult this journey is going to be. He doesn't see the end of this road, and it's a mountain, so you can only imagine how long that journey is going to be. But he doesn't care because he doesn't want to turn back. He knows that he needs to grow past this. And in his final line, he's saying, I know that I have to move past this, and I know I can't turn back. But that doesn't mean I love you any less. And this song continues to show that even though we appreciate and love Tom as both an artist and musician, he is still a human and experiences the same amount of grief and emotion that all of us have experienced and we can relate to. That song was so intense, and that is definitely one of the high points of this album for me. All right, the next song is Identikit. Identikit. I love this beat. It's kind of reminding me of 15 Step. Maybe out of sight, out of mind. Love that bass groove. The synths is a good addition to this. I like that guitar. These voices off to the side, it's almost like his thoughts just running wild through this. I know that some of these songs were originally written or conceived during earlier stages of the band's life. Some of them were written around the Kid A sessions, and I gotta say, a lot of these songs feel like they could have been part of Kid A or In Rainbows from what we're listening. So we finally get the album name drop in this song, A Moon-Shaped Pool, and going along with the music in this song, I was getting a sense of tribal feelings from the drums, but it wasn't primitive. It was more distinguished, like a higher society. And that line going along with the dancing clothes, it's almost like a ritual is taking place. And a moon-shaped pool, to me, is almost like the watering hole of this village or this society. And it's almost like its own love dance that's taking place at the moon-shaped pool. There's this sense of longing that's coming out from these first couple of lines, but when we get to sweet-faced ones with nothing left inside, it's almost as if he sees the lack of fruitfulness that's coming out of his partner. And now that he has that space away from them, he sees that there's nothing left to gain or left that is beneficial to his growth moving forward. And we get to a section where, with all that in mind, he just wants to get away from the situation. He wants it to be out of sight, out of mind. Broken hearts make it rain. Same thing as I was saying in the previous song, in that those repeating lines are his way of healing, his way of getting his message across to himself. And most of the time, broken hearts see things in a negative light. They see things very pessimistically. And this could be taken literal in making it rain. You're just crying all the time, dealing with these emotions. This section right here, pieces of a ragdoll mankind that we can't create. To be honest, I'm kind of drawing blanks on what that may actually mean, so I'm curious to see what everyone else's thoughts are on this line in particular. But this was a very upbeat song, and as a musician, those are the songs that I tend to gravitate towards the most. So this is going to be a song that I'm going to be listening to pretty regularly, I can imagine. The next song is The Numbers. The keys are very bright, but there's this depth in the bass. It's giving it like an unsettling feeling. Ooh. Feels like a lounge actually now.
Holds us like a phantom. The touch is like a breeze. Open all channels. Ready to receive. To hold your tongue. The future's inside us. It's not somewhere else.
The music is so hopeful.
Call upon people. People have this power. You may pass away like soon.
That was pretty epic. The first section of this song, I'm thinking the theme of it is, as it's been in the previous songs, and that's love, and the different forms that love can take, especially in this first section. And it continues that theme into the second part, but Tom is saying that you no longer have your control over me, and I can see through your tricks and your spells. In this section, Tom is saying, we spend way too much time in our heads coming up with all these different scenarios and overthinking. We need to come back down to earth. And he said the future is inside us. That's like a mic drop line. He says it's not somewhere else. So all of your potential, it's not a destination, it's within you. So the last section of this song, I'm not going to lie, when I was doing my research on the album and the themes that were running through it, I did see that there was some political elements within this album. And we can clearly see that right here. I'm not going to touch on this section too much because I think the message is pretty straightforward, but I think that it really does tie into the overall narrative of this album as well. The next song is Present Tense. Ooh, those brushes. Almost like shuffling or sweeping. It's very romantic, actually. Is this a bossa nova? Those echoing voices, again, it's like his thoughts weighing on him. I love this drum pattern. This feels very romantic, but it's more it's more lighthearted than heavy-handed. There's some sadness to it, but I'm feeling more happiness through it. Yeah, that was very romantic. The main message here is don't be living in the past, don't be living in the future. Try to live in the now. The dance could really be anything, but some sort of activity or hobby that you are doing to keep yourself occupied and not allowing any of your intrusive thoughts or your mind to be idle to then start thinking about your situation. He doesn't want to hold any anger or resentment to his partner. He needs to just accept it and move on with his life, regardless of how difficult of a journey that will be. Here he's saying he doesn't think that he did anything to deserve this pain, but he's coping with that by dancing or doing something to occupy his mind. But even as he's doing that, he is completely numb to the world around him right here. And that continues on as he's stating how in love he still is with his partner. The next lines, he's trying to show his love for her and himself by stating, I have to move on from this, not just for you, but for myself as well. I'm not going to run back at the first sign that you want to take me back. And I'm going to do my best to not allow your absence or presence to faze me, or all of this love, both for you and for myself, is going to be in vain. Here he's talking about the shadow work that goes into this acceptance, this healing, and moving on, that not a lot of people are going to be present for. This is one of the most romantic songs I've heard from not just Radiohead, but in general. And the band has really honed in all of the elements in their music that really tugs at their listeners' heartstrings with this. And the next song is Tinker Tailor, Soldier Sailor, Rich Man, Poor Man, Beggar Man, Thief. Okay. That effect and the bass sound like a signal that was trying to be sent.
All the holes at once are coming alive, set free. The ones you light your fires to keep away.
Feels like he's in a cave again.
All you have to do is say, yeah. All the birds stay up in the trees, all the fish
Feels starry, like you're stargazing. Very piercing. It's calming, but there's like this dread to it too. That was also pretty unsettling. I was getting the song Kid A vibes out of that little radio static sound. You know, in a lot of their music, especially in Rainbows, a lot of the music felt like life was just breathing through the entire mix. There were so many different colors from song to song within that album, and this song in particular felt like it was lacking in all of that. So this song had a lot of lifelessness within the music at the beginning, and at a certain point, almost as if he was accepting in his own message, that's when the music really started to develop and added more instruments to the mix. I started visualizing being out overseas on a voyage, and with the texture of the cymbals, it's like the waves that are hitting the side of the ship. Something about the swaying of those strings along with those synths, I don't know why, I started getting a picture of the Northern Lights, and of course, those are full of color. So it's almost like a trip going through darkness and then finally coming to a place where there is so much life out in the world. This fire that he's talking about seems to be his own defense mechanism to move forward and not allow himself to fall back into his depression or back to the past. The final song is True Love Waits.
I'll drown my beliefs to have you, baby, and wash your swollen feet. Don't leave, don't leave. I'm not living, I'm just killing time.
Such a great piano pattern. And the multiple piano parts.
You're crazy kid and smile. True love waits on lollipops and crisps. Don't leave.
I love that. Tom and the band have such a great way of wrapping up their stories within all these albums. This song felt just as satisfying of a conclusion as Videotape did for me. I can imagine all of these words are very specific and personal to Tom. I'm sure there's a lot of deeper meaning that only his partner would be able to recognize. But overall, he's just going down memory lane, and while he is attempting to move on, he's concluding with the fact that he doesn't really want to. He even says he's not really moving on, he's just killing time until she comes back to him. And he really believes that this is a true love and their time will come again, whether that's true or not. The main piano progression in this song, I believe, represents Tom as a person and as that constant across the entire band's discography that we've heard so far. And it's really reflective of his life and passion in music in that it has been so constant across everything. And those other piano parts that were going alongside that main progression as this song was going on, it felt disjointed but complementary to it at the same time. To me, it's like those parts are their own pockets of memories and adventures that he is clinging on to with his partner. And I think this song is going to be almost its own memory lane for Tom to relive those memories. This album, while there was a lot of pain and sadness within each song, that would not be possible if it wasn't backed up by this love that Tom had towards his partner. And while I'm not sure where this album sits with me among the other Radiohead albums, what I do know is the quality from album to album is no less than what we heard in OK Computer, Kid A, and In Rainbows. I really liked this album, and it has some of my favorite Radiohead songs of all time now. But thanks so much for checking out this video. Please let me know any of y'all's thoughts on A Moon-Shaped Pool and maybe what your favorite songs are. I also want to say I've seen all of y'all's comments about other albums from Radiohead that I should listen to, and don't worry, we are eventually going to listen to all of them. I have not forgotten about any of the previous albums. We will eventually go back and revisit all of those albums in the future. But thanks so much for hanging out, guys, as always, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Thanks.